Good morning. We'll get this session started. My name is Debbie Wells. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Communications for Cemex, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning for our Resilience of Concrete in Construction session today. Today we are honored to have two amazing experts in the field. First, I'd like to introduce Tiffany Reed Villarreal. She is the Director of Sustainability Codes and Standards for the National Ready Mix Concrete Association. She is a licensed professional engineer in Texas and a credentialed Envision sustainability professional. Tiffany supports concrete producers and state affiliates in sustainability codes and standards, development, education, and advocacy for the ready-mix concrete industry. Tiffany earned her Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. She holds over 15 years of experience in structural engineering and consulting and has been involved in codes and standards development, sustainable infrastructure, and advocacy and government relations. Also joining us today, I'd like to introduce Tom Tietz. Tom Tietz is the Executive Director of the California-Nevada Cement Association. In his role, Tom is involved with and oversees regulatory and legislative efforts that focus on infrastructure and the environment. He actively is engaged in the association's mission to be an established resource for technical engineering throughout the region of California and Nevada. Tom's career started in architecture after receiving a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Arts degree in architecture from the University of Illinois and practicing as a licensed architect. Tom has been working with trade associations since the mid-90s. These associations include the California-Nevada Cement Association and the Concrete Reinforcing Steel Institute. He has provided seminar topics to agencies, architects, engineers, contractors, and universities across the United States. Please help me in welcoming both Tiffany and Tom. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Cemex, for inviting me to be here today. I appreciate this opportunity. We're going to be talking about resiliency and the concept of resiliency in the AEC community and why it's important. This will be a very high-level overview. National Ready Mix Concrete Association, that is me. So I'm a structural engineer for over 15 years and worked in residential construction for the first 5 years of my career, and then went over to work in the infrastructure space for pipe, box, and culverts, and did that for about 5 years in Texas, and now I'm with National Ready Mix Concrete Association. So when I was with the pipe and box culvert world, I focused a lot on resilience in the infrastructure space, especially with stormwater infrastructure that would often, alternative materials would often burn during fires. And so there was a lot of discussion on resilience and infrastructure and water quality and drinking water infrastructure. And so that's my basis on the discussion for resilience. Today I'm focused mainly on sustainability codes and standards with a focus on embodied carbon. So over the past several decades, there's been a huge amount of wildfires that have been happening. We've had several billion-dollar disasters over and over and over, and in 2024, there were actually 27 separate weather and climate disaster events exceeding $1 billion. 2017 was actually the worst year on record for disasters, and all of this data that I'm sharing is coming from NOAA, if it's still up and available. So according to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 2017, as I said, was the costliest year. It had a price tag of at least $306 billion. And requests for federal disaster aid increased tenfold in 2017 compared to 2016. So these once rare events are now happening more frequently and costing more dollars and more loss of lives. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. So according to the Insurance Solutions, 4.5 million U.S. homes are at extreme risk of wildfire, with more than 2 million in California alone. So, and according to Munich, 23.1 billion in losses of wildfires in the U.S. over the past 5 years. So we're seeing extreme cost to communities, to insurers, and to the general public and cities and municipalities as a result of these disasters that are happening. As I said, 2017 was the worst by far, with 17 billion losses, and that number is still likely to grow as we face increased climate threats. So although a lot of attention is placed on California because of the major wildfires in 2017 and 2025, there's wildfire risk in all states. There's massive wildfire risk in my state of Texas. We see it every summer, and it's, we have a lot of rural areas, so it doesn't cause as much damage sometimes, but we see some massive fires in Texas. So, and so many people want to live in the WUI. They want to be in the woods and where the mountains are, and those are the hardest places to defend and protect. And so we have to look at those kind of situations. So as you can see, that billion-dollar disaster events are on the rise, and you can see adjusted, this is CPI adjusted averages. So you can see the increase that's taking place over the last 20 years or so is just going up exponentially. So this graph is also adapted from NOAA and shows the upward trends of cost of disasters. It's just a lot of data for you guys about what's happening and why this is important. So for a building to be sustainable, we have to consider the future use and reuse designed for long service life with minimal disruptions for communities and for occupants. So there's a lot of ways to reduce the environmental impacts for green building codes and rating systems like LEED, IGCC, ASHRAE 189.1, ASTM. We have all kinds of codes and standards out there to really help us to design more resiliently. But they're not being widely adopted for some reason, and resilience hasn't been a total priority, and when we look at the relationship between resilience and sustainability, you have to know that a building that's sustainable may not be resilient, and so it's not really sustainable if you're having to rebuild it after every major disaster. So we need to figure out ways to adapt and mitigate some of these potential threats. So the evolution of resilience-based design, it starts with the code, and it's often just looking at, a minimum code requirement, life safety, and it's very prescriptive on how the building code inspector needs to check these things, and it's usually individual buildings only. And then you get into more of a performance-based kind of design, which looks at more holistically at the project and what the damage and recovery time will be. And LEED is doing a good job of this with their resilience prerequisite in the LEED v5 version. So we're starting to see some focus come into resilience, and we need to really grab a hold of that momentum and advocate and educate on these resilient topics. And then resilient-based design, if you say, hey, I want to build resiliently, everybody's like, oh, we can't afford to build resiliently, and it's like, well, we can't afford not to build resiliently. So we need to figure out a way to fund these types of resilience projects and how to incorporate that into our design development. And it starts with the architectural and engineering community and advocating with the codes, municipalities, and the states to make sure we're incorporating some of these things. So here's some steps for disaster resilience. You want to obviously update the building codes. And after wildfires, we see a rollback in this, and we see politicians and policymakers saying, oh, we need people to rebuild in this area, and so we need to roll back the requirements to make it affordable for them to do so. It's very short-sighted. We need to adopt high-performance building standards and incentivize disaster-resilient construction. We need to make sure that we're offering some type of carrots to these opportunities, and that that developers and homeowners and building owners in general and cities want to pay that extra upfront cost to make sure they're going to recoup it over the long term. And then we want to use robust materials. And obviously I'm with the concrete industry, and so I'd want you to build all your projects with concrete. I think it's a great material. I love it. But we also need it for another reason, and that is to fight off some of these threats like wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, all of that. What does it look like to adopt high-performance building standards? So here's a couple of things you can look at. You can look at it, enhanced building codes, fortified for safer living and safer businesses. USRC has a building rating system, ready, and rely rating system for resilience. So these are just a few of the frameworks that you can look to help give you some guidance on how to incorporate resilience into your projects. Resilient buildings reduce the risk. So in fortified, in spite of having these types of framework, the only state that is mandatory fortified is Oklahoma. Surprise, surprise, tornadoes, right? So they have a requirement for that. There's 2 other states, Mississippi and Alabama, that it's not mandatory, but they do give rebates for it. And none of the other states have adopted things like this. And so why are we not doing this with the cost of insurance and the number of disasters we're facing? So I would encourage to look at that you look towards some of these principles to try and guide your next project. So here's some other ways we can incentivize it. You can use building permit rebates. You can have property tax reductions for building resiliently. You can accelerate permitting if you're a city, state, or municipality. You can accelerate those permits for resilient construction design. So there's ways that we can offer carrots without necessarily giving away the farm. So zoning benefits, maybe you could build higher because you're building a more resilient building. So you can increase your heights, And then more favorable developer agreements for construction of resilient properties. I mean, if time is money, then we make sure we put them at the front of the line because they're incentivizing things that are going to pay back the community in the long run. And then you could also offer a revolving loan program. So those are some of the incentives and things we can do at the state level. And as architects, engineers, we can encourage our states or cities to do that, incorporate some of these things. I'm guilty of being the past planning and zone chair for my little city. So it was kind of fun working on the codes and standards side, as an official in that capacity. And I learned a lot about how to deal with city politics and residents to help further some of these incentive programs. So obviously we want you to build with robust materials. We feel like concrete is fire resistant, non-flammable, and durable, that it stands up to hurricanes, it stands up to tornadoes, it stands up very well to most natural disasters, and will be a place of safety and comfort for residents when they seek shelter. So to quantify the benefits of resilient construction, there's a couple of resources I can share with you, and that's the UIL Returns on Resilience business case on how we can make a business case for resilience in our projects. NRMCA also has an insurance cost study. Our booth is right behind me. Stop by over there and I'll make sure to get you any information you need on that insurance cost study. The National Institute of Building Sciences, or NIBS, has a lot of great information on resilience, as does USRC, but MIT break-even mitigation percentage tool. So MIT does have a tool that they have created, and you guys can go on there and access it, and it's going to help you make a business case for resilient design and construction. This is for hurricane-prone areas, by the way. So in conclusion, there's increased risk posed by natural hazards from weather-related and seismic and fire events, all of them. And resilient construction can address these assets by offering protection and building functionality as well as life safety for the residents in your city. A number of approaches exist to mitigate it. Remember this. Building codes are a minimum requirement. So if you are building to building code, you're more than likely not building resiliently. A lot of cities, municipalities have not updated building codes in quite a long time, so they may need a little help with that. NRMCA is happy and willing to help them update the building code and send it to me, and I'll redline it and send it back, and then they can take it or leave it. But we're not going to get there with the outdated codes. We also need, that's it. Just make sure that for improved building performance and natural hazard mitigation, you're considering all these topics, because otherwise we're just not getting anywhere. We're just keep redoing the things that are failing over and over and over. And you could look to California on that.
Thank you, Tiffany. My name is Tom Tietz again, California-Nevada Cement Association. And while Tiffany covered resiliency from a national perspective, I'm going to dial in to this neighborhood we're in here. We're looking at Southern California. It's where I live. And the topic I'll be zeroing in on primarily is wildfires. And I would tell you that before January 7th of this year, wildfires felt more personal to me than professional. I live in a neighborhood where I've been evacuated twice. I've seen homes and apartment buildings burn to the ground, including homes of my friends. And not only is that heartbreaking and hard to see, but even the rebuilding is extraordinarily difficult and painful. So what changed on January 7th was remarkable because of the extent of what happened right here in the LA area. There were more than 16,000 structures destroyed in the Palisades and Eaton fires. That included, what some people don't remember is that there were commercial buildings, schools, places of worship, all burned, and I mean completely burned. 238 multifamily residential facilities. If that alone happened, it would make the news, but there were also more than 11,000 single-family homes that were destroyed in these two fires. And that cost added up to between 35 and 45 billion in insurance payouts. And while all of a sudden, this went from a personal issue to a professional issue, was that in very short order, our association and our staff became engaged in the response to this and started reacting to some new demands that we hadn't seen before. So I'll describe some of that and what's been happening on the ground, but also hit on some larger images and ideas. And one of those real themes and concepts that I think is worth driving home, particularly as we've been so focused on sustainability in particular over the last couple of decades, is that I think this really resonates. It's time to marry resilience with sustainability. The most sustainable structure is one that you don't need to rebuild. And we would like to stress these core tenets of resiliency, making sure you're maximizing safety in your designs, minimizing damage, and looking at your structure, your building in a way that can expedite recovery no matter what disaster might be coming at you, like Tiffany was covering earlier. So I just want to say one thing about the multifamily market. I think what you hear most about related to wildfires focuses specifically on single-family homes. But even in California here, we do have a pretty rich example of inner city urban infill projects that are using concrete frame. They're good for fire resiliency even from within. And we see a growing interest in these as well. Here's an example of an affordable housing facility in San Francisco. And yeah, your floor-to-floor heights are lower. You're typically able to add more floors into these structures. And again, you're talking about an inherently fire-resistant material. And here it is. This is where it hits home for me. You can see on the maps here that much of California now has new fire hazard severity zone maps. And that now includes nearly 4 million residents in the state. So the image on the upper right, that impacts me. That black dot is my home. I'm now in an orange zone, and my neighbors just around the corner from me are in a red zone. That makes it harder to insure, harder to rebuild. We have another staff who's smack dab in the middle of a red zone now. So this is impacting people where they live, and also it creates, I have to tell you, this sense of urgency where you're all of a sudden worried about insurance, you're worried about what you've seen happen in the past, and it's making a difference not only in your pocketbook, but even how you sleep at night. So with that, one thing that's been fascinating to me is that folks have reached out to us for help. These include wildfire survivors that are demanding one thing. They don't want any combustible materials in their homes, and they're adamant about it. And that's not the easiest thing to ask for when you're talking about a home building industry that's done one thing one way for so long. And so the dominant way of building homes is with wood in this country. It's so apparent. It's so apparent even in fire zones. But the question I think that's being asked now that's so compelling is, if there is a wildfire and that's fueled by brush or trees or other things, why would you build buildings, homes that add to the fuel? It's time to stop doing that. And that's what these folks you see on the screen are demanding. It's what they really want to do for their individual homes. And so we've been out to visit and tour different non-combustible homes. It's also spurred our association to work with others in the state to create a resource called Building with Resilience, where we feel like we have an obligation to help people learn and know how to build back better. And so we're trying to be a good resource for folks on this, and these are the sort of things we've gotten involved with. Along with our partner organization, CalCEMA, at the state level, we've been working with legislators. There were more than 60 bills that started off right after the session began here in January that focused on wildfire in one way or another. We were successful in working with the two senators you see on the screen here to come up with a Senate resolution focusing on building resiliency. It promotes building resiliency in all future development in the state. We also have a model code that's on this website with Building with Resilience that effectively shows you how to build with a 2-hour fire rating. You could take that code to your local agency or city and demand such a thing or implement it on your own design. And then we're also trying to get out to help educate folks about the various options they have, particularly related to concrete homes. So I mentioned the fact that we put together a model ordinance. These are a few of those components that are built into that. We've also been contacted by the media asking questions like this. LA folks are asking, why not build homes that don't burn? So this is an article in Civil Engineering magazine. That's a brand new home built with insulated concrete form, which is entirely non-combustible. Even the roof on that is concrete and steel. And what I wanted to is just touch on a couple of challenges. Well, I probably just painted a picture like we have demand for answers about non-combustible construction. There's still questions, and we still have challenges. If you look at why there hasn't been more of this done in the past, part of it is that folks just don't know that there's options available for building homes out of concrete. I think there's these perceptions that it's going to look either like some movie star's home that's real sleek and modern, or it's going to look like a prison. That's not the case. And there's also different ways of doing this. So part of why I wanted to show this image on the screen is that these are some different systems that can be used to build concrete homes. You see an insulated composite concrete form on the bottom left of the screen. There are sandwich panels, like in the bottom middle image there. And then on the upper right, you can find insulated concrete form. You can look right over here and visit these folks right afterwards. These are a couple images from Nudura, which is literally to your left. And you can't leave today without talking to these folks, either at Cell Blocks or Tremco. And so these are the sort of systems that you can look to that won't have the same problem as a wood wall. And yet we also are getting interest in making sure not only are the walls non-combustible, but so are the floors and the roof. So you're looking at systems that you typically might find in a commercial type building, but they can be utilized in homes. And so here's a couple pictures that have been sent to me by architects that we've been working with concrete homes. And I think the important thing here, if you look at the interior here, you're not looking at something that's stoic or austere. These homes look good and feel good from the inside as well because of the thermal value you also get from having a strong thermal mass in these walls, which also helps you with your energy costs. So what can we do with all this? Here's a few suggestions. We need to put resiliency and sustainability together. Have those two things always in your mind. You can still put low carbon concrete in a wall in a home as well as in a high rise or any type of other structure you may be working on. And we want to make sure that we're specifying resilient materials that are widely available locally. I think that's another key thing we have an opportunity to do here. And then what we've found valuable for folks is that they're contacting us. We're a not-for-profit trade association with technical expertise. I see Nate Forrest in the back of the room. He's a superb resource, particularly here in California and Nevada, for understanding your mix designs and also these different kinds of concrete systems. And then what's interesting about any kind of home you may be building, you already have concrete being delivered to that site. Your foundations, your hardscape, if you have a pool, you already have those trades on site. This is a matter of looking at a bigger picture of how they can be utilized beyond that. So that's what I've got for today, and I'm eager to hear what kind of questions you have for me and Tiffany. We're ready.